You ever have one of those days where the world just seems hell-bent on reminding you of your place? Yeah, that was me. April 17th. Gate C18 JFK Airport. The morning started off promising enough. Sky was clear, I'd closed a minor deal with a boutique finance firm in the city, and I was flying to San Francisco to finalize something that might, just might, be the thing to turn my startup into a real contender. My name's Elise Monroe, by the way. Founder and CEO of CoreVision Labs. Well, CEO in the way that anyone with a two-person team and a dream calls themselves that. We built a prototype AI system that could automate architectural design for urban housing. The potential was massive. But potential doesn't pay your rent. So yeah, this trip mattered. I had my best blazer on, laptop charged, hair tied back, nerves steadied. First class ticket in hand, bought on points I'd been stacking for 2 years. I wasn't going to let them see me as anything less than someone who belonged. Until I got to the gate. The agent didn't even glance up when I walked forward. Just looked at my boarding pass, frowned, and muttered, "Wait here." 2 minutes later, a stiff-lipped supervisor marched over. I still remember his name, Greg. Said there'd been an error. That my ticket had been flagged. Fraudulent. That I'd have to step aside. I blinked. Fraudulent? That ticket was booked 2 months ago with points from my own Amex Platinum. Want the statement? Didn't matter. They said the seat had been reassigned. Security protocol, Greg mumbled, refusing to meet my eyes. I felt the weight of people staring. I felt that slow, hot shame creep up my neck. "Ma'am, please step out of the priority lane," Greg barked louder now. "We'll rebook you in the main cabin. Or refund your points if you'd prefer." I was stunned. Like someone had just sucker punched me and I couldn't even protest because it all seemed so surreal. People were watching, whispering. Some pulled out phones. One guy, gray suit, slick back hair, that Wall Street swagger, smirked as he passed. "You don't look first class anyway," he muttered. That did it. I stepped out of the line, sat down near gate C20, and dialed a number I hadn't called in 2 years. "Hello?" A voice answered on the third ring. "Hi, it's Elise Monroe. I'm calling in that favor." Silence. Then a low chuckle. "Didn't think I'd hear from you again. I need you to set up a call with Red Ridge Holdings. Tell them I'm ready." The voice paused. "You're serious?" "I just got kicked out of first class. I've never been more serious in my life." And that was the beginning. I didn't get on that plane. Instead, I sat there in Terminal 4, legs crossed tight, watching the planes come and go like lives on fast forward, and waited for a return call from the person who just might change everything. Red Ridge Holdings wasn't just another private equity firm. They were the kind that didn't show up in Forbes unless they wanted to. The kind that acquired, restructured, or quietly dismantled billion-dollar companies while the rest of us were still blinking at quarterly reports. And the man I just called? Adrian Langston. He was their rainmaker, the fixer, the negotiator, the closer. We had history. Not romantic, not exactly. But once upon a time, I'd worked at a firm called Arcadia Partners. Fresh out of MIT with an MBA and no fear. Adrian was a senior consultant there, and I was the bright-eyed rookie who didn't know when to shut up. We had one project together, only one, but I'd made an impression. Challenged a Fortune 500 CEO in a boardroom full of suits. Nailed a prediction no one else saw coming. Adrian called it gutsy. I called it Tuesday. He told me, over scotch and dim sum in a back alley in Hong Kong, "You've got the kind of mind that scares men like me. Someday when you're tired of pretending to play fair, call me." I never did. Until now. My phone buzzed. Caller ID, unknown. I picked up. "Elise Monroe," the voice said, smooth, unreadable. "Adrian. Still gutsy, I see. I need a meeting." "With Red Ridge?" "No," I said, glancing toward the gate where Greg the gate troll was now helping someone else into my seat, with the board of Luxair. That caught him off guard. Silence stretched for a beat, maybe two. Then, "Elise, Luxair's a $2.6 billion operation. You're telling me you want to meet their board?" "No," I said. "I want to buy them." He laughed. A full, deep laugh. "Jesus. You really got kicked out of first class, didn't you?" "I've never forgotten how power feels," I said. "And I've never needed a bigger middle finger than right now." "You're serious?" "I have a platform. CoreVision. We're sitting on IP that every logistics giant wants a piece of. If I structure the deal right and you back me, I think I can do it. Or at least start a hostile move to shake them until they remember who their customers are." Another pause. Then, "Send me your numbers. I'll get you in front of the acquisition team. You've got 48 hours. Click. My heart was racing. I had no plan. Not really. I had some raw data, a pitch deck that hadn't been touched in months, and an anger that made me feel like I could bend steel. I didn't sleep that night. I holed up in a cheap boutique hotel in Manhattan, one with good Wi-Fi and worse coffee, and rebuilt my entire financial model from scratch. I projected revenue synergies if Luxair integrated CoreVision's AI routing system into its cargo fleet. I built a competitive analysis that made them look outdated. I drafted an entire post-acquisition operational structure, CEO included. Yes, me. I didn't even blink when I saw the mirror at 5 a.m. My reflection looked like someone who hadn't showered and had slept on graphs, but her eyes were on fire. At 9 a.m., I walked into Red Ridge's office in Hudson Yards. The lobby alone looked like a Bond villain's summer home. Marble everything, waterfalls for no reason, and staff that probably had PhDs in intimidation. A receptionist smiled just enough to let me know she'd seen women like me walk in with dreams, and walk out with silence. But Adrian? He stood there, arms crossed, eyes scanning me like a recruiter looking at a draft pick. You look awful, he said. That's a good sign. I didn't come to look cute, I said. I came to win. He smiled. Boardrooms this way. We walked through a glass corridor. Inside the conference room were 6 people, 3 men, 2 women, and one who looked like they belonged in a war room, not Wall Street. I knew some of their names from headlines. One had taken down a pharma giant. Another had turned a bankrupt airline into a multi-billion-dollar unicorn. Adrian leaned into my ear before we entered. Convince them you're not crazy. Just visionary. Easy, right? The next 90 minutes were a blur. I pitched like my life depended on it. Because it did. I talked fast but not too fast. I controlled the room, not with arrogance but with clarity. I answered questions before they were asked. I showed them what Luxair was missing, and how I could own the gap they refused to see. When I finished, the room was silent. The woman in the red jacket, Vanessa Bellamy, Red Ridge's chief of strategic acquisitions, was the first to speak. You're either delusional or you just walked in here with the playbook to unseat a sitting airline CEO. I'll let you decide, I said. But I know how this story ends either way. Adrian stood. We'll deliberate. As I walked out, he pulled me aside. They like you. But they think it's a long shot. Most great things are. And Luxair CEO? He's a nightmare. Plays dirty. Real estate holdings in 5 countries. A golden parachute tied to a board majority. I don't need to win today, I said, adjusting my bag. I just need to make them bleed enough to blink. Adrian smirked. You still scare men like me. Later that night I got the call. They weren't going to greenlight a full buyout, yet. But they'd back a strategic stake. 10%. Enough to rattle the boardroom. Enough to get me in the next shareholder meeting. The deal would take 2 weeks to close. And that's when I made the second call. To a reporter. Hi, I'd like to leak something, I said, smiling to myself. It's about a woman who just bought a piece of the airline that kicked her out of first class. Her name was Madison. She ran a popular Substack called Business Bitch. Within 24 hours, the headline was everywhere. Tech CEO kicked out of first class. Now she's buying the airline. It went viral. Like trending worldwide viral. Some people called me petty. Some called me genius. Most didn't know what to make of it. But one person definitely noticed. The CEO of Luxair. And he was about to come for me. I knew he'd call. Men like him always do, especially when the power dynamics shift without their permission. It happened exactly 47 hours after the news broke. I was at a cafe in Soho, sipping overpriced green tea and pretending to answer emails when my phone rang. No caller ID. But I knew. I let it ring twice. 3 times. Then picked up. Elise Monroe, I said. There was a pause. A breath. Then a voice that oozed the kind of boardroom polish you can't buy with an MBA. Miss Monroe. This is Douglas Stratton, CEO of Luxair International. I smiled. Oh, I know who you are. Good. Then I won't have to waste time with introductions. I'm calling to make this unpleasant little situation go away. I leaned back in my chair. Unpleasant? You mean the article or the investment? The article, he snapped. And the childish implication that you, what was the headline again? Bought the airline that kicked you out of first class. I took a sip. Actually, I only bought a piece. For now. His silence was colder than a fuselage at 40,000 feet. You're playing with something far bigger than you understand, he finally said. I've been in this industry longer than you've been alive. And yet here we are, I said, you calling me? He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Do you honestly think a 10% stake gives you leverage? Not alone. But with public pressure, shareholder noise, and a whisper campaign? Let's just say you'll need to start watching your six, Doug. Ms. Monroe, he said, his voice dropping low, this is your only warning. Back off. Cash out. Go back to your little tech sandbox before someone buries your toy. And there it was. The threat. I expected it. Men like Stratton didn't rise through corporate hierarchies by playing nice. He was old Wall Street. Country club connections, offshore accounts, loyalty only to profit. I'd read enough to know he wasn't just brutal in business, he was meticulous. Calculated. A viper in Armani. But he'd made one mistake. He thought I was afraid. I ended the call without another word. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my mother. She answered on the third ring, breathless. Elise. Hey Ma. Baby, are you alright? I saw the news. You really bought the airline? Part of it. Pause. Then a laugh. Lord have mercy. Your father would have loved this. I don't know if it's brave or insane, I whispered. Probably both, she said. But that's the Monroe blood. Your great-grandmother once sued a bank during segregation and won. You think this airline CEO scares me? I laughed, a real one this time. The kind that shakes off fear. Thanks, Ma. Go get him, baby. I hung up and dialed Adrian next. I need access to the shareholder list, I said. And their executive compensation reports. He didn't even ask why. Check your inbox in an hour. From there, the real work began. Because buying into a company isn't the endgame. It's just the invitation to the dance. And if you want to lead, you've got to learn all the steps, know who's stepping on toes, and find the rhythm no one else hears. So I did my homework. Douglas Stratton was arrogant, yes, but also sloppy. Luxair's last 2 quarters had underperformed expectations. Their customer satisfaction scores were plummeting. And buried deep in their executive filings? A clause that stated if 3 or more board members filed a no-confidence vote against the CEO, his golden parachute could be revoked. Boom. Leverage. I started working the back channels. Calling friends in high places, whispering into ears at investment dinners. I even hosted a casual mixer at a rooftop bar in Tribeca and made sure every Luxair board member received a personal invitation. Disguised, of course, as a celebration of innovation and new voices in transportation. Showed up. I charmed them. Played humble. Told stories about how CoreVision started in a garage and how I coded our first prototype with an IKEA desk and borrowed Wi-Fi. I left out the part where I once cried into a bowl of ramen because I had to choose between rent and data server costs. They ate it up. 2 drinks in, I gently brought up Stratton. Not directly. Just a question. Don't you think the public's looking for more accountable leadership these days? Especially after the whole United incident last year? One of them, a silver-haired finance guy named Leonard DuPont, nodded grimly. We've had concerns. There it was. By the time the night ended, I'd planted more than seeds. I'd watered them, lit them, and let them bloom in the dark. The next week, Red Ridge quietly increased our stake. 15%. Luxair stock began to twitch. News outlets speculated about a potential shakeup. Stratton responded by doubling down, appearing on CNBC, calling me a novelty act, and saying Luxair would never be held hostage by tech world publicity stunts. I released a Medium article the next day titled, What First Class Should Really Mean. It went viral in less than 10 hours. I didn't attack him. I didn't mention the incident. I just told the story of what it felt like to be dismissed, disrespected, and silenced, and how too many people experience that daily in corporate systems built for exclusion. I framed it as a call for innovation, dignity, and transparency. Suddenly, I wasn't just a tech founder. I was a movement. Customers started tweeting with the hashtag #FlyWithElise. Shareholders demanded a special meeting. One even wrote an open letter. And Stratton? He was boiling. I knew because I got a letter the next day. A real one. On heavy cream-colored stationery with Luxair's crest embossed in gold. Cease and desist. Refrain from public commentary. Withdraw your stake. Stop interfering with executive leadership. I framed it. Right next to the original first-class boarding pass I never got to use. But behind the scenes, Stratton wasn't just mad. He was scared. Because one of his secrets was about to surface. And I wasn't the one who found it. One of the Luxair board members sent me a message. Just a name. No explanation. Isla Vasquez. I Googled her. Former senior engineer at Luxair. Filed a whistleblower complaint 2 years ago. Disappeared from the industry entirely. I found her LinkedIn. Inactive. Her Twitter? Dormant. But I found an old blog. Buried in a corner of the internet. Password protected. Guess what the password was? First Class 2023. When I unlocked it, I found a detailed archive of internal memos, emails, and private communications. Proof that Stratton had knowingly ignored a serious safety fault in the Luxair cargo fleet. Proof he'd buried the report and quietly settled with the lead engineer to prevent a lawsuit. And guess what? One of the affected aircraft was still in operation. Still flying. Still a ticking time bomb. That's when I realized, this wasn't just about first class anymore. This was about lives. And suddenly the game wasn't just personal. It was moral. Have you ever had a moment where the weight of everything shifts? When the stakes suddenly elevate beyond ego, beyond revenge, beyond even money? That's what happened the second I finished reading Isla Vázquez's blog archive. This was no longer about being kicked out of first class. This was about cover-ups. About safety. About people unknowingly stepping onto aircraft that could fail mid-flight. And worst of all, Stratton had known. Not suspected. No. The documents were damning. Internal emails with timestamps. Maintenance reports flagged red. One from Isla herself, sent with the subject line, Urgent, Flight Cargo Bay Stress Test Results, 3008 Series. His reply? A single sentence, handle it quietly. No headlines. And then she disappeared. Fired, most likely, then gagged with a settlement. It explained everything. Why no other airline had picked her up. Why she'd gone off-grid. I sat in my apartment, still in the same jeans from 2 days before, scrolling through the blog with shaking hands. Outside, the city was its usual indifferent self. Horns, sirens, life. But inside my little world, everything had changed. I had a choice. I could leak the documents, go full Edward Snowden, burn it all down and let the public do the rest. Or I could do something even more dangerous, play the long game. Because now, I had something better than leverage. I had the truth. The next morning I called Adrian. You're not going to like what I found, I said, and then walked him through it. Every word, every screenshot. When I finished, there was a long silence. Finally, he said, Jesus Christ. I know. You could go to the press. I could, I said. But I want something better. I want Stratton removed. I want the board to install new leadership. Someone who gives a damn. And I want Isla Vázquez back. No NDAs. Full exoneration. Her name cleared. You realize this is blackmail? No, I said calmly. This is justice. Corporate style. He sighed. We'll need more than this to make it stick. Paper trails. Testimonies. I'll get it. And if we go nuclear? I looked at the framed cease and desist on my wall. Then let's make it beautiful. First I reached out to Isla. That was easier said than done. Her email bounced. Her LinkedIn was still dead. But I had an address from an old alumni listing from Cal Poly. I mailed a letter. Yes, an actual letter, with just one line. I believe you. Call me. E. I didn't expect her to respond. But 3 days later she did. She didn't call. She showed up. I opened my front door to find a woman in her late 30s, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, holding a canvas bag and eyes that said she hadn't trusted anyone in a long time. You Elise? Yes, I said. She walked in without waiting for an invite. I'm not here for therapy. I'm here for war. We spent 5 hours going through her evidence. Not just the emails I'd already seen, but full maintenance logs, internal engineering memos, and a private recording of a meeting with Stratton, where he explicitly said, if this goes public, we lose 2 quarters and the board panics. Sweep it and reassign the engineer. It was a smoking gun. I thought about leaking it, Isla said, pacing my living room. I even loaded it all onto a flash drive once. But then they threatened my sister. She's a flight attendant. Said she'd never fly again if I talked. My stomach turned. You still want to do this? She met my eyes. I came all the way here, didn't I? We formed a plan. Red Ridge would convene an emergency shareholder meeting under the clause of executive misconduct. We'd present the evidence directly to the board, quietly at first. If they moved to oust Stratton, we'd keep it internal. If they didn't, then we'd go public. And when I say go public, I don't mean just press releases and press conferences. I'm talking a New York Times exclusive, a sit-down on 60 Minutes, a viral video campaign showing the faces of the people Stratton had endangered. And yes, Isla was ready to go on camera. I'll never forget the day of the meeting. It was held in Luxair's headquarters, an imposing glass tower in Midtown, guarded like Fort Knox. I walked in with Adrian, Isla, and 2 of Red Ridge's lawyers. None of us spoke in the elevator. We didn't need to. Upstairs, the boardroom was everything you'd expect. Mahogany table, chrome finishes, bottled water that cost more than most meals. And at the head of the table? Douglas Stratton. His face the picture of corporate confidence. Until Isla walked in. He paled. Just for a second. But I saw it. The flicker of fear. "This is a closed meeting," he barked. "Not anymore," I said. "We have urgent evidence of executive misconduct, and under the bylaws of Section 14C, we have the right to present it before a vote of no confidence." The chairman, a woman named Judith Wexler, looked unimpressed. "Make it quick," she said. I let Isla do the honors. She started slow, just enough to make them lean in. Then she dropped the recordings, the emails, the logs, and finally the settlement agreement she was forced to sign, complete with its gag clause. "This isn't just a safety issue," she said, voice steady. "It's a moral one. And it's time Luxair stood for more than just status and stock price." The room was silent. Then Judith spoke again. "We'll recess for 20 minutes. Then we vote." Stratton didn't say a word. He just stared at me. When the board returned, the vote was swift. 7-2. Stratton was removed. Effective immediately. Judith stood. "Miss Monroe, I understand you've expressed interest in guiding the transition?" I nodded. "Well," she said, "you've certainly earned the right to try." As we left the boardroom, Adrian turned to me. "You know you just started a war with half the industry, right?" "I know," I said, pulling out my phone. "One call. That's all it took." "Hi, Madison? Yeah. I got a story for you. A big one. And this time, I'm naming names." The next day's headline? Airline CEO removed after shocking safety cover-up. Whistleblower and tech visionary lead the charge. And underneath, a photo of me and Isla, standing on the steps of Luxair HQ, no longer outcast. No longer silenced. Not passengers. Pilots. Power doesn't feel the way you think it will. It's not some dramatic swell of music, or a chorus of voices chanting your name. It's quieter. Sharper. Like standing at the top of a skyscraper you helped build, the wind brushing your face, and the city humming beneath you, not with admiration but with recognition. That was me. 2 days after Stratton's removal, I was sitting in the interim CEO's office of Luxair International. A room I once couldn't even walk past without security giving me the side eye. Now it was mine. Well, temporarily. The board had agreed to a 6-month trial. I'd serve as acting CEO while they assessed long-term leadership alignment with stakeholder priorities. That's boardroom speak for, impress us and maybe we'll make it permanent. I wasn't stupid. I knew this was a test. Half the board didn't like me. Half the staff didn't trust me. And the world was watching. Waiting to see if the woman who went viral for getting kicked out of first class could actually fly the damn plane. I was sitting behind Stratton's old desk, still smelled like cologne and old power, when my assistant buzzed in. "You've got a meeting with the executive ops team in 15. Right?" I said, standing up and grabbing my tablet. "Thanks, Laura." The executive floor conference room was already filling when I walked in. COOs, CFOs, PR heads, department leads. Some looked bored. Some looked hostile. A few looked intrigued. I stood at the front of the table, connected my tablet to the screen, and pulled up the presentation I'd worked on all night. "Let's get something straight," I began. "This isn't going to be a normal first meeting. I'm not here to ease in gently. I'm here to disrupt." That got their attention. I clicked to the first slide. "Luxair's reputation is bleeding. Your customers don't trust you. Your employees feel expendable. Your engineers have been ignored. And after everything that just happened, your shareholders are one more crisis away from pulling out." I turned and faced them. "So if you're expecting business as usual, this is your cue to leave the room." No one moved. Good. Now let's talk about how we fix it. For the next hour, I laid out the plan. It was aggressive. It was radical. It was risky. And it was exactly what they needed. 1. Transparency protocols. Every safety incident, no matter how minor, would be logged publicly within 72 hours. We'd hire an independent safety board to audit our fleet quarterly and publish the results. 2. Employee Advocacy Council. Staff from every level, flight attendants, mechanics, ground crew, would nominate a representative to speak directly to executive leadership monthly. No filters. No spin. 3. AI Logistics Optimization. CoreVision's tech would be implemented into Luxair's cargo operations immediately, cutting waste, increasing speed, and saving millions. 4. Customer Redemption Campaign. For every customer complaint logged in the past 18 months, we'd send a handwritten letter and a voucher. Not automated. Not templated. Real human apology. Real compensation. 5. Flight 3008 retirement. The aircraft series involved in the cover-up? Retired. Publicly. We'd scrap them in a media-covered event and replace them with a new class. Rebranded, repainted, and renamed. Isla's idea. When I finished, the room was silent. Then the CFO, a gaunt man named Clay Holloway, raised a hand. "This will cost us nearly $40 million in the first quarter," he said. "Correct," I replied. "And what if it doesn't work? What if this is just a PR wave?" I stepped forward. "Then we'll fail with integrity. But if we keep doing what Stratton did, cutting corners and covering sins, we won't fail. We'll crash." That got a reaction. A shift. Some nods. Some frowns. But no more objections. After the meeting, as the room cleared out, a woman stayed behind. Late 50s, salt and pepper hair, a sharp green suit. Her name tag read M. Halvorsen, engineering chief. "I watched Isla get pushed out," she said quietly. "Tried to stop it. Got demoted for performance inconsistency 6 months later." I looked her in the eye. "I'm sorry." She nodded. "Don't be. Just don't let them shut you up too." And then she walked out. That night, I returned to my hotel suite. Luxair was putting me up at the peninsula until they figured out my permanent arrangements. There were flowers from Adrian. A card that said, "Still scaring men I see." I smiled. Then sat down and finally, for the first time in days, let myself feel it. The weight. Because it was a lot. Running a company isn't about one speech or one bold idea. It's waking up every day knowing 1,000 people's jobs depend on you not screwing up. That every decision echoes through supply chains, markets, and lives. I poured myself a glass of wine. Sat by the window. Watched the skyline blink like stars caught in traffic. Then my phone buzzed. A text. "Unknown. Enjoying your view, Monroe? Hope it lasts." I froze. Another one came through. "You just made enemies you can't even pronounce." I stared at the screen. A chill crept up my spine. This wasn't Stratton. He was too arrogant to text threats. This was someone else. Someone in the shadows. I called Adrian. "Yeah. I think there's someone watching." "Who?" "I don't know. But I just got a text." "You forward it?" "I will now." He exhaled. "I'll loop in security. Lock your doors. Don't go anywhere alone." "I'm not scared," I said. "You should be. These people don't just lose quietly." After I hung up, I stood and walked to the window. Down below, the street buzzed with life. Taxis, people, noise. But I suddenly felt very alone. That's when I saw it. A black car. Parked across the street. Engine off. Lights out. It had been there when I arrived. Still there now. No one moved inside. Coincidence? Maybe. But I trusted my gut. Something was coming. And whoever they weren't just angry. They were dangerous. You never forget the first time you feel hunted. That night I didn't sleep. I locked every door, double-checked the windows, even wedged a chair under the handle. Something I hadn't done since grad school in a sketchy Boston apartment. The street below pulsed with the muffled rhythm of a city that never sleeps, but my focus remained fixed on one thing, the car. It stayed there until 3:14 a.m. Then it pulled away, slowly without fanfare, melting into the blur of late-night traffic. I didn't catch the plates. I didn't see the driver. But I knew one thing for certain. It wasn't over. The next morning, I walked into Luxair headquarters with adrenaline in my blood and a list of enemies in my pocket. I didn't tell the board about the threat texts. Not yet. I couldn't afford to seem paranoid or rattled. Instead, I focused on stabilizing the company. Phase 1 of our corporate overhaul was already in motion. The media storm hadn't died down. In fact, it had morphed into something unexpected. A movement. Employees from other airlines started reaching out anonymously. Pilots, baggage handlers, engineers, even C-level executives at competitor airlines sent encrypted emails. Some shared their own horror stories. Most just wrote one sentence. "Don't stop." Red Ridge doubled down on their support. Vanessa Bellamy herself flew in from London to shake my hand. "I underestimated you," she said, without a hint of embarrassment. "You're not just good for business. You're dangerous in all the right ways." I took that as a compliment. By week's end, I'd earned my first real win. A unanimous vote from the board approving the full rollout of CoreVision's logistics AI across all Luxair cargo operations. It would save millions in fuel and route optimization. But more importantly, It would prove we weren't just reacting to crisis. We were innovating. Everything was looking up. Until I saw his name again. Damien Graff. It was buried in an email forwarded by my head of legal, a consulting report from an independent auditor hired by Stratton during his final year. Graff's firm, Tiberian Consulting, had been contracted for a fleet optimization analysis. But here's the kicker. Tiberian didn't exist. Not on paper. Not on LinkedIn. Not in any legitimate registry. I ran the address listed on the invoice through a reverse lookup. It was a UPS store in Newark. Whoever Damien Graff was, or claimed to be, he'd created a shell operation and billed Luxair nearly $2.4 million for services that never existed. And the signature authorizing those invoices? Stratton's. No wonder he fought so hard to stay in power. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Damien Graff wasn't just a fake name. It was a front for someone else. Someone watching. Someone texting. I dug deeper. Cross-referenced the phone number that had sent me the anonymous threat. It was masked, of course. Routed through a series of foreign relays. But I had a friend at a cyber forensics firm in D.C., Mara Tran, someone I once beat in a robotics competition and who still owed me a favor. Can you track this? I sent her the number. She didn't reply for 2 days. Then she sent me 3 words. You need protection. My blood ran cold. I called her immediately. What did you find? I asked. I didn't find where the message came from, she said, but I found who owns the infrastructure it was routed through. Who? Fresno Sky International. I blinked. That's a shipping conglomerate. Exactly, Mara said. They also happen to be one of Luxair's largest private cargo clients. And Elise. Yeah. They have ties to organized crime. Deep ones. The pieces clicked fast. Stratton. The falsified invoices. The missing safety reports. And now Fresno Sky. This wasn't just corporate corruption. This was criminal. Suddenly, my campaign for transparency had wandered into the territory of federal crime syndicates. These weren't just men in suits. They were the kind of people who made people disappear when those people got too curious. That night I called Isla. You still want to be part of this? I asked. More than ever, she said. Good, I said, gripping my wine glass too tightly. Because we're not just rebuilding an airline anymore. We're digging up a cartel. She went silent. Then, you realize what that means, right? I nodded even though she couldn't see it. We're going to need help. So we made a list. Whistleblowers. Investigative journalists. Federal contacts. Lawyers who didn't flinch when words like RICO and racketeering came up. We were going to expose the rot. But before that, we had to survive the backlash. And it came fast. The next day my hotel room was ransacked. Nothing stolen. Just disrespected. Desk drawers pulled out. Clothes scattered. My tablet cracked in 2. No security footage. No witnesses. No fingerprints. It was a message. The next one came in the form of a voice memo, sent to my work email, untraceable. Just static at first. Then a voice. Oh, raspy. You're flying too close to the sun, little girl. You want to be the hero? You'll end up buried with the rest of them. I played it 3 times. Then forwarded it to Adrian and the FBI field office in New York. The next 48 hours were chaos. Security at Luxair headquarters was doubled. I had a personal protection officer assigned to me by the Bureau. The board tried to hush the incident, but I told them no. We don't hide anymore. I held a company-wide town hall. Live-streamed. Fully transparent. I stood on stage and told the truth. That Luxair had been infiltrated by a web of corruption that went deeper than we'd realized. That our fight for integrity had poked a very dangerous nest. That there would be risks, but I would not back down. The room went still. Then a single clap. Then a few more. Then an eruption of applause so loud it shook the walls. People were tired of lies. And they were ready to follow someone who finally told the truth. Afterward, Isla stood next to me backstage. You sure you're okay? She asked. No, I said. But I'm not scared anymore. She smiled. Good. Because they're about to get desperate. She was right. The next twist in this story wouldn't come from the shadows. It would come from the inside. From someone I trusted. Betrayal never feels how the movies tell it. There's no dramatic music, no slow-motion gasp. No shattering of glass in the background. It's quieter. Colder. Like someone pulls the floor out from under you without so much as a warning whisper. That's how it hit me. And the worst part? I should have seen it coming. The morning started like any other since the chaos began. Security detail at my side, meetings stacked back to back, and another surge in Luxair stock after our AI rollout proved wildly successful on the East Coast cargo routes. For a fleeting moment, it felt like we were stabilizing. Like the worst was behind us. Until Vanessa Bellamy requested an urgent face-to-face. It was unusual. She didn't fly in without cause. Red Ridge had backed me heavily, too heavily for her to risk a shakeup this late in the game. She met me in my office, this time without the entourage or the designer poise. No PR guardrails. No subtle politicking. "Elise," she said, closing the door behind her. "We have a problem." My heart rate spiked. "Fresno Sky?" I asked. "No. Worse. Internal." She paused. "Adrian." I blinked. "Adrian?" "You're Adrian," she said. "The man who vouched for you. Brokered the Red Ridge deal. Helped push the Luxair acquisition through." "What about him?" She handed me a folder. Thick. Stamped confidential. I opened it. Invoices. Wire transfers. Email exchanges. Financial trails. All pointing to one conclusion. Adrian Langston had been quietly working with Fresno Sky the entire time. I didn't speak for a full minute. My mind was flipping through every conversation, every knowing glance, every cryptic warning. "He brokered my meeting with Red Ridge." "Yes," Vanessa said. "He backed my bid. He helped ensure it passed. He gave me the files on Stratton." She nodded grimly. "Because he wanted Stratton out. Not for you. For them." I staggered back as if the words had punched me square in the chest. "He used me," I whispered. "I was the Trojan horse." Vanessa sat down across from me. "Not exactly. You were real. Your ideas, your passion, your transparency. That was genuine. What he did was take your momentum and build a backdoor for Fresno Sky." "To what?" I asked. "To own Luxair?" "To use it," she said. "To funnel cargo through deregulated hubs. To sanitize their smuggling routes. You were never the target. You were the vehicle." I dropped the folder on the desk. "He lied to me," I muttered. "He played you," she corrected. "And now we have to decide what to do about it." Part of me wanted to storm out of that room, confront Adrian face to face and demand answers. Closure. Some version of the truth. But I knew better. Adrian wasn't a man you cornered. He was a chess player. If he'd gone this far, he already had 2 exits planned and a dozen counters ready. Instead, I called Isla. "We have a mole," I said. "Who?" "Adrian." I heard the silence on her end stretch like wire pulled too tight. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "Then we do it my way." I wasn't sure what that meant, but I was too shaken to argue. She arrived at my office 3 hours later with a jump drive and 2 burner phones. "We need to smoke him out," she said. "And we're going to make him think he's won." The plan was brutal in its simplicity. We'd pretend to fall apart. I would call Adrian and subtly hint that I'd been pressured by Vanessa to resign, that I was tired, frustrated, and most importantly, willing to cut a deal if he could help protect my future. Isla would be listening in through a secure line. Meanwhile, Vanessa would quietly arrange for an internal audit to sweep through every Fresno Sky contract we could find, cross-referencing dates, payment structures, cargo manifests. If Adrian took the bait, we'd trace the pipeline. If he didn't, then we'd need a new playbook. But deep down I knew he would. Because men like Adrian, they always think they've won. I made the call from my private office. Camera off. Voice just shaky enough to sell the illusion. "Adrian," I said. "I need help." His voice came through too smooth. Too calm. "You all right?" "No," I said. "Vanessa's breathing down my neck. She's digging into the Red Ridge files. She knows something's off. If they force me out, I'll lose everything." "I warned you," he said. "Flying too close to the sun, remember?" I hesitated just long enough to make it sound real. I could leave quietly. No fuss. I need insurance. Something to land on. I know about Fresno Sky. The silence on the line was sharp. Then his voice again. Well, measured. "What exactly do you know?" "Enough." He paused. "You want out?" "Yes." "Meet me tonight." The elevator at Grand Orchard, loading bay level. 11:30 p.m. Don't bring anyone. And just like that he hung up. I turned to Isla, who had recorded the entire call. "He's setting me up." She nodded. "He's not planning to talk. He's planning to erase." Vanessa moved fast. By 6 p.m. I had a team of 3 federal agents watching the Grand Orchard building. By 9 we had the full surveillance layout mapped. Adrian was already in the building by 10:15. They didn't want me to go. But I insisted. I need to see it in his eyes, I said. I need to hear it. Wired, tracked, protected. I entered the garage at 11:29. He was waiting, leaning against a sleek black Mercedes, hands in his pockets like a scene from an old noir film. Elise, he said, smiling. You look like hell. I walked slowly. You betrayed me. No, he said. I protected you. I gave you the spotlight, the boardroom, the brand. Everything you wanted. But not the truth. He shrugged. Truth's overrated. I stepped closer. You used me. I elevated you. I trusted you. He sighed. That was your mistake. Then he reached into his jacket. I didn't flinch, because that's when the garage lights exploded on. Agents poured in from every side. Guns drawn. Voices shouting. FBI. Hands where we can see them. Adrian froze. For a moment I thought he might bolt. Might draw. Might scream. But instead he laughed. Soft. Chilling. You have no idea who you're messing with, he said as they cuffed him. I stepped forward, inches from his face. I do now. They dragged him away. The next 48 hours unfolded like a thriller. Fresnowski's corporate offices were raided. Dozens of sealed files opened. And the smoking gun? Adrian's encrypted communications, naming executive officials, freight coordinators, even a former Luxair VP on the payroll. All part of a multinational smuggling operation that had been laundering money and materials through ghost cargo flights. Luxair was a pawn. But not anymore. Not under me. By the week's end, headlines were everywhere. Criminal network uncovered inside airline conglomerate, Luxair CO praised for internal cleanup. And somewhere in a detention facility in upstate New York, Adrian Langston sat in silence. His game was over. But mine? Mine had just begun. Power is addictive. Not the superficial kind, the likes, the retweets, the headlines. I'm talking about real power. The kind that moves markets, rewrites rules, makes silence expensive and truth a commodity. The kind I never asked for but somehow, after all this, found myself wielding. The day after Adrian's arrest, I stood on the rooftop of Luxair's Midtown headquarters, staring out over the city like it belonged to me. In some small way maybe it did. At least for now. News outlets were calling me the Silicon Storm. Investors hailed me as a disruptor. Employees, real people with real lives, stopped me in the hallway just to say thank you. I even got a handwritten letter from a retired pilot in Georgia who wrote, I flew for 32 years. You're the first CO I've ever believed in. And yet, something wasn't sitting right. Because while the arrests and exposés had taken out the head of the beast, I knew better than to think the rot stopped there. Fresno Sky was just one tentacle. Adrian was just one pawn. The system that allowed all this, the fake consulting firms, the fake audits, the criminal corridors wrapped in legitimate contracts, it was still alive. And now that I'd wounded it, it was coming for me. 2 weeks passed. The press storm slowed. The board convened and with a 6-3 vote, offered to remove the interim from my title. CO. Permanent. I should have been thrilled. But then the anonymous packages started arriving. No return address. No note. Just symbolic threats. The first package contained a single unmarked airplane oxygen mask. Still sealed. Mint condition. The second? A flash drive. Empty. The third, most chilling, was a framed black and white photo of Isla standing outside her apartment. Taken from across the street. She hadn't even known someone had been watching. She sat on my office couch that evening, staring at the photo like it might burst into flame. I knew this would come, she said. I didn't, I admitted. They always send a warning first. She took a slow breath and set the photo down. Then she looked at me with the kind of clarity that only comes after surviving a nightmare. Elise, we can't just win battles anymore. We need to tear down the war machine. I looked out the window. You mean aviation? No. I mean the system. She leaned forward. Do you know how many other airlines use shell consulting firms? How many turn a blind eye to external audits that are actually just laundering schemes? Do you know how often cargo is used as cover? I knew. Deep down, I'd known since the first time I saw the false invoices. I just hadn't wanted to look that far down the rabbit hole. But now I didn't have a choice. We formed a task force. It started internally, me, Isla, Vanessa, and an independent forensic analyst named Mika Rowe. Within a week, we'd uncovered more than a dozen suspicious contracts in Luxair's archives alone. Outdated software systems linked to anonymous offshore accounts. Maintenance vendors that hadn't performed a single documented service in years. We terminated all contracts. Froze payments. Released a public statement. And then we went further. We reached out to 3 other major airlines, anonymously at first. Whistleblowers. Employees sick of watching the same movie on repeat. One of them, a mid-tier compliance officer from a European airline, sent a voice message that still haunts me. They make you choose between your job and your conscience. And the scariest part? Most people choose the job. We compiled the evidence. 2 weeks later, I flew to Washington, D.C. under the radar. No cameras. No entourage. Just me, Isla, and a steel briefcase of digital proof. We met with members of the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Federal Aviation Administration. I laid everything out: data, testimony, the complete breakdown of how airlines had become silent facilitators of global financial crime. It wasn't just about Fresno Sky anymore. It was bigger, wider, rooted in bureaucracy, loopholes, and layers of plausible deniability. I expected skepticism. I got stunned silence. Then one of the senior officials, a woman in her 60s with tired eyes, leaned forward and said, "You realize this could take down half the top 10 airline carriers in the world?" I didn't blink. Good. The next week was a blur. Federal subpoenas. Internal investigations. Massive market panic. Stocks dropped. Press releases scrambled. Executives resigned. But Luxair? We rose. Because we were the only ones that didn't wait to be caught. We lit the fire ourselves. And in doing so, we became the only airline trusted enough to survive it. I made my next move swiftly. Formed a coalition, the Clear Skies Alliance, a non-profit watchdog group built from engineers, auditors, whistleblowers, and ethicists from every corner of the industry. Our mission: clean aviation from the inside out. And while the world watched the skies collapse, we handed them a map out of the fog. I was on my way back to New York, riding in, yes, first class, when the flight attendant handed me a handwritten note. I opened it slowly. "You don't know me, but I used to work for Tiberian. You're not done. They're still out there. This goes deeper than aviation. If you want to end this, follow the money. Start with Asgard Shipping. Burn it all. A friend." I read it twice, then folded it and tucked it into my coat. The rabbit hole wasn't done. But this time, I was ready to chase it to the bottom. The deeper you dig, the louder the silence gets. I knew that before, but I'd never felt it like this. It wasn't just quiet. It was suffocating. The kind of silence that follows you into meetings, stalks your inbox, makes shadows twitch where they shouldn't. And the name in that letter? Asgard Shipping. I hadn't heard of them before. No surprise, companies like that don't crave attention. But a quick dive into Luxair's historic vendor logs showed a paper-thin trail. One logistics contract. 6 years ago. Short-term. Buried under another vendor's name. No red flags. No press. No lawsuits. But I trusted the letter. So I followed the money. I had Mika Rowe, our forensic analyst, trace every invoice tied to that 6-year-old contract. The trail was cold. Most records had been wiped or routed through shell companies. But one offshore transaction stood out. $11.2 million wired from a Cayman account linked to a private equity firm called Trinexus Ventures. Trinexus wasn't aviation. It wasn't logistics. It was everything. Shipping. Pharma. Military tech. Infrastructure. You name it. And at the center? A man named Graham Kells. The kind of billionaire whose name never trended, yet he had private islands, a standing seat at Davos, and, according to Vanessa, more offshore subsidiaries than most countries have embassies. I sat back in my chair, staring at Kells' face on my laptop. Graying hair. Thin lips. Eyes like ice. This wasn't just a new enemy. This was the architect. He wasn't on the radar because he designed the radar. I called Vanessa. I need a full report on Trinexus. Assets, partners, off-the-books holdings. All of it. Elise, she said carefully, this is beyond corporate warfare. Kells is untouchable. No one's untouchable, I said. Not anymore. But as soon as we started digging, the pushback came fast. First, Luxair systems were hit with a coordinated cyber attack. Not some amateur DDoS stunt. This was precise. Targeted. Our cargo tracking network went down for 6 hours. Flights were grounded. Losses totaled over $8 million. Then came the smear campaign. Anonymous reports leaked to tabloids, accusing me of insider trading, falsifying financials, and, my personal favorite, bribing the FAA with cryptocurrency. All fake. All planted. And just to drive the point home, someone hacked into my personal calendar and posted a fake resignation announcement to my own social media at 3 a.m. The post went viral before I could take it down. Hashtag Monroe Meltdown was trending. But the public didn't turn on me. Because by now they knew who I was. I wasn't the villain. I was the one fighting them. And when I went live on national television that same morning, sharply dressed, unflinching, I told them everything. I will not be silenced, I said. I will not be intimidated. The people attacking me are the same ones who profited from criminal networks inside our industry for decades. And now that we're shining a light, they're scattering like cockroaches. It wasn't a speech. It was a declaration of war. And the world rallied. Even governments began to take notice. The EU opened a joint inquiry. Canada launched a review into all Asgard-linked cargo. 2 senators introduced legislation to tighten corporate ownership transparency in transportation contracts. But none of that mattered if I didn't hit Trinexus where it hurt. So we went after their leverage. I flew to Zurich. Met with a small, fiercely independent auditing firm that had quietly monitored shell companies for international banks. We'd helped them avoid scandal once. Now they owed us. They gave me the missing piece. A holding company under Trinexus called Orion Trade Partners had funneled payments to Stratton, Adrian Langston, and shockingly, a sitting member of Luxair's own board. Clay Holloway, the CFO. My heart nearly stopped. He'd voted in my favor. He'd backed the AI rollout. He'd been in every room, every decision, nodding along like a loyal dog while feeding information directly to the people trying to destroy us. I called a meeting immediately. Vanessa, Isla, Mika, Judith Wexler from the board. I laid out everything. The money trail. The shell contracts. The real-time communications logs between Holloway's work terminal and a secure server tied to Orion. Judith's jaw clenched. I'll call an emergency board vote. But I shook my head. No, I said. I want him to see it coming. We staged a fake board meeting. Announced it as a financial forecast review. Clay walked in, smug as ever, holding his tablet and latte like a man 10 minutes from a promotion. Instead, he walked into a trap. Every board member was waiting. The projector screen displayed a full breakdown of his activities. In silence, he watched himself burn. When the lights came up, I stood. You can resign, I said, or you can be arrested. He didn't speak. He just reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and smashed it on the table. Security was already waiting. 2 federal agents walked in and led him out without a word. I turned to the board. Anyone else? No one moved. Later that night, I received another note. Slipped under my hotel door. No envelope. Just 3 words typed. You've made it personal. I didn't sleep. Neither did Isla. We're close, she said. Too close. I don't care, I whispered. I didn't start this. But I'll finish it. Because here's what no one understood about me. Not Stratton, not Adrian, not even Graham Kells. I wasn't chasing money. I wasn't chasing revenge. I was chasing the end. Not the end of a company. The end of a culture. The end of the silence that let monsters wear suits and fly private while they broke lives beneath spreadsheets. And I was almost there. But to get the final piece, I'd have to walk into the lion's den. There's a moment just before you cross a line you can't come back from, when the world feels eerily quiet, like it's holding its breath to see what kind of person you really are. That was me, standing outside the towering glass fortress in Singapore where Graham Kells kept his personal office. Not his corporate one, the official address was in Zurich, but this was where the actual power was handled. No press. No shareholders. Just velvet silence and men who didn't flinch when words like sanction or indictment were whispered in boardrooms. This wasn't a courtesy visit. This was a confrontation. I'd spent weeks preparing. With Mika's forensic data, Vanessa's political channels, and Isla's engineering knowledge, we'd assembled an airtight dossier that linked Asgard Shipping, Trinexus Ventures, and Orion Trade Partners into one massive criminal web, laundering billions through international logistics, weapons exports, blood-mined minerals, even human trafficking routes buried in the margins of humanitarian aid. But none of it would mean anything if we didn't cut off the head of the snake. So I requested a meeting, through a very private intermediary who owed me a favor from my MIT days, when I'd built an encryption app that saved his company from a $90 million breach. The request was simple. Tell Kells I have something he can't buy. The response came within 24 hours. 1 hour. Private floor. No phones. Come alone. That alone told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't worried. He still thought this was chess. I took the elevator to the top floor. It opened to silence. Just a man in a tailored suit waiting beside a biometric door. No greeting. No name. He just scanned my palm, somehow already programmed, and motioned for me to enter. The office was cathedral-like. Not in grandeur but in atmosphere. Minimalist. Gray. Cold. Graham Kell stood at the far window, looking down at the harbor as cargo ships glided like ghosts across the water. He didn't turn. Elise Monroe, he said, voice calm, British, barely above a whisper. The girl who wanted revenge and accidentally found power. I didn't come for revenge, I said, closing the door behind me. I came for answers. He turned then. Measured. Controlled. Every movement a reminder that he had survived things most people couldn't pronounce. You've made quite a mess, he said, moving to the desk. Stratton, Langston, Holloway. You've gutted an entire generation of loyal operators. Operators? I repeated. Is that what you call them? They laundered blood money through airline manifests. He waved a hand. They were efficient. They kept the system lubricated. You mean corrupted? Semantics. I stepped closer, set the leather binder on his desk. You know what this is. He didn't open it. I do, he said. And I know why you brought it. You think if you burn me down, the machine stops. I leaned forward, my voice ice. No. I know the machine doesn't stop. But I can make it bleed. For the first time his mask cracked just slightly. A flicker in his jaw. A narrowing of his eyes. You're not the first to try this, he said. There was a man in London. A woman in Cape Town. Brilliant people. They all disappeared. I'm not them. No, he said. You're worse. You're idealistic. I smiled. That's what terrifies you. He studied me for a long time. Then walked to a cabinet and poured himself a drink. One glass. He didn't offer me one. You know, he said, sipping, you could walk out of here with enough money to disappear forever. No one would blame you. Your name's already immortal. You could write books, give TED Talks, build another company. I don't want immortality, I said. I want accountability. You'll die chasing that. Maybe, I said, walking to the window, standing beside him. But I won't die on my knees. Silence stretched between us. Then finally he spoke, quietly, like an old king conceding the end of a reign. What do you want? Public confession, I said. On record. Full admission of Trinexus operations. Your role. Your partners. You name them all and you walk. He turned to me slowly. Walk. Immunity deal. Already prepared. DOJ signs it the moment you testify. No prison. But you lose everything else. Assets seized. Power revoked. And you disappear. Not as a legend, but as a cautionary tale. He stared at me, gauging if I was bluffing. I wasn't. He set down his glass. You really believe the world can change? No, I said. But I believe we can break the people who profit from keeping it broken. And then, he nodded. Just once. And everything that followed happened fast. The recording. The DOJ deal. The high-level arrest. News networks scrambling to keep up as one by one, names that once ruled industries were dragged into daylight. Some went quietly. Others fought back. But none escaped. Within 6 months, Trinexus Ventures ceased to exist. Dozens of shell companies were dissolved. Fresnowski's assets were frozen in 9 countries. And every airline that had signed a contract with Asgard Shipping was now under full audit. And Luxair? We rebuilt from the ashes. Transparent. Ethical. Sustainable. Not perfect but honest. We were the first major airline to publish every dollar spent in vendor contracts. The first to launch a real-time ethics dashboard. And the first to appoint a whistleblower to the board of directors. Her name? Isla Vasquez. As for me, I didn't stay forever. I stepped down after 1 year, quietly. No press tour. No farewell gala. Just a final letter to my team that ended with, the sky doesn't belong to those who control the planes. It belongs to those brave enough to change the flight path. I now teach occasionally at MIT. I consult for nonprofits. I grow tomatoes on a rooftop garden no one knows about. And I sleep better than I ever have. Until sometimes when I get a call. Anonymous tip. A cryptic note. Someone in another industry, another country, chasing their own impossible truth. They ask, how did you do it? And I always say the same thing. I didn't. I just made the call. The one call that started it all. The one call that changed everything. And I'd do it again. In a heartbeat.